And at 10, chromophobia. With a game that's full of bright colors and based around a factory that makes children's toys, it's fairly obvious that running into colors is guaranteed. While there are specific fears for specific colors, cyanophobia being the fear of blue, xanthophobia being the fear of yellow, parishnophobia being fear of green, chrysnophobia is the fear of orange, rhodophobia is fear of pink, castanophobia is the fear of brown, leukophobia is the fear of white, and melanophobia is the fear of black. But with all the different colors in the first chapter and upcoming second chapter, we're gonna be in for one hell of a time if you're in fact scared of colors. I mean, like the grab pack has different colored hands, and those colors are an important part of the puzzles that use said grab pack. So playing with the saturation down or in black and white would be pretty damn difficult. Also, random question, could someone who is colorblind have, like, let's say the fear of yellow, but since they would see red as yellow, would they really be scared of yellow? Or since the doctor is the one diagnosing them and seeing that they're scared of red, would they be diagnosed as scared of red? Let me know your thoughts, cause my brain is mush. And at 9, puppophobia. The fear of puppets, also known as puppophobia, is associated with human-like dolls a la Chucky or Annabelle. So, if you want to make an allegory like that, Poppy would definitely cause this fear to be triggered. And not only that, but literally this entire game revolves around humans turned into dolls and toys, which would be a major trigger with those with puppophobia. Major trigger? Especially since, you know, they're sentient dolls, which is literally the fear. Like, if Shane Topp was wigging out in a room full of porcelain dolls in that one Smosh video, I'm sure this man would flip his shit being in a room with dolls that are very clearly sentient and also after your guts. Like, holy living crap, I thought FNAF would be a trigger for puppophobia because, you know, the puppet, but this game is so much worse for it, or at least it seems like it would be. And at 8, necrophobia. Again, I feel the need to clarify I said necrophobia, as in the fear of death, not attraction to it. So, considering how the main threat in Poppy Playtime is death, I think it's fairly safe to say that those who fear death wouldn't enjoy this at all. I mean, of course, most of us dislike the concept of death, but not wanting to die and having an actual phobia of death are very different things. And there is a lot of death in this game, especially when you're panicking because a giant blue furry Gumby reject is chasing you. So much death, in fact, that the game actually gives you messages when you die, confirming the fact that you are actually dead. Not to mention the countless other people who died due to 1006 escaping or died to become toys. And while that isn't literal death because they are kind of organic toys, it is the death of their human body. However, as I usually say, this death isn't real, so it could just be that you're not scared of it at all. So if that's the case, ignore this number and pretend I said something profound and meaningful, along with hit like and subscribe. And at 6, huggy survival. Okay, when you're put on the hook in this, I mean when you're put in one of the holes in this game, because this isn't Dead by Daylight, you have to play the whole huggy wuggy minigame from chapter 2 to stay alive until you're revived. You basically just gotta whack a bunch of huggies in the face for as long as you can. However, my question is, why is this the thing that you're thrown into? Because from what we know, until chapter 2, these huggies are on strings that pull them back if they get too close. Mommy cuts them in chapter 2 and then dies shortly thereafter, so if we're never at the location to kill her, the huggies never get released, because she cuts them to stop us. Meaning that this shouldn't be a threat at all. My other question is, why is this what we have to fight against if this is meant to be a children's game, okay? Like, forget why the huggies are dangerous if other events don't occur. This is established in the series as a game meant for kids. Why is this the thing that we fight for our lives in if it's meant for children? Come on, this is a very FNAF feeling sort of scenario, if you know what I mean. And also, if you're still here, hit like, okay? We might farm FNAF content, but we're not doing it anymore very much. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, FNAF reference? Is it just me, or does a giant gold statue of Huggy Wuggy in the center of what seems to be a play area ring any alarms for anyone else, okay? Because, like, looking at this, it is a very similar layout, kind of design-wise, to Security Breach's Mega Pizzaplex, with a set of stairs on either side, and like I said, a giant statue of their mascot in the middle. And honestly, with all the questions that we've had and the comparisons we've made and all the similar elements of children becoming the toys or characters that so many love, and all the gruesomeness that comes with those implications, I don't think that this would be very much of a stretch, especially since this doesn't confirm the places or companies as the same universe, but because after all it would just be a reference. But it's still a fun little little nod to no doubt a major inspiration for the series, considering how Poppy Playtime and Mob Games was created by Enchanted Mob, who's done a lot of FNAF-based Minecraft animations. Of course, they didn't intend on copying or anything like that, but they were definitely just inspired by the series. So this would definitely be a nice reference, and I'm pretty sure something that was intended as such. In it for skins. The skins of the various monsters, as well as something that could have heavy implications. I mean, Huggy Wuggy has a robot skin, for God's sakes. Do you know how much that messes with me? Okay, like the original theory that we had until we figured out that people were toys was that Huggy was a robot. And that's all because sentient animatronics are always on our mind like a really old Cody Simpson song. But now, it's actually a thing that there are Huggies that are robots. Is that what this means? So yeah, does that mean that the other Huggies out there that we haven't defeated yet just might be robots that we'll have to fight in later chapters? Or is this just like a FNAF World situation where we can't be sure about it until they confirm it, and they'll only confirm it if we like the idea? Like how Multiverse of Madness was meant to just be like testing for how the audience would react to Jim Halpert as Mr. Fantastic, the return of Black Bolt and Professor X in the MCU, right? Like, is this just to test things like Boxy Boo before they're added to the main canon? Or is it closer to a special delivery thing where all of these are canon and they'll feed into the main story and will break everything we know about the series for like the 8th time this year? Who knows? Not me. I wish I did. Then we would get more views. Getting close to the end, in number 3, claustrophobia. Claustrophobia, as we all know, is the fear of Santa Claus. Thanks to SpongeBob for teaching me that as a kid. Seriously though, the fear of small spaces is certainly going to get triggered in chapter 1, since as I've mentioned multiple times in this video, we end up running through the conveyor belt area, which is very cramped. So cramped, in fact, that Huggy has to like force himself into it and then crawl through it like a kid in a McDonald's play place. My father is a self-diagnosed claustrophobic, and he doesn't even like going down the stairs in his house because the walls are too close. So he would 100% hate this section with a passion. However, now that I mentioned that, he is also paranoid, thinking that the government is after him, and thinks that people will steal my identity through my name on a school assignment from 2009. So maybe that isn't the best example, but still. Boy, do I wish I was exaggerating. Like everyone has like the weird conspiracy theorist uncle, but I don't, because that uncle is my dad, and not in the Alabama way, you sickos. But ultimately, in at number 2, arachnophobia. Arachnophobia is the fear of spiders, and while in something like every fantasy game ever there are giant spiders, that's not really a thing in Poppy Playtime, right? Well, that was true, but along comes chapter 2, and in comes Mommy Longlegs, probably the most confusing spider-like figure I've ever seen. And trust me, I've seen some things, okay? Skyrim modding is an interesting rabbit hole. However, this Mommy Longlegs is gonna be one hell of an interaction if you have severe cases of arachnophobia. However, with milder cases such as mine, I think you should be okay. I mean, the only reason she looks like a spider is the multiple legs. Like, she doesn't really look like a real spider other than that, which makes it easier to handle. Like with DJ Music Man from Security Breach. Like, that guy didn't set off any arachnophobic alarms in my body, which is certainly a good thing, because I don't like being scared, especially by a phobia. Like, being scared is a bad thing. I don't know why people would search it out. Like, fear means that you're in danger, and being in danger is bad. Adrenaline junkies are one thing, but actually being scared is another, I think. I don't know, okay? I don't have friends who go out and do fun stuff, so I just chill at home. If I ever get accused of murder, I'm gonna have no alibi. Because my dog can't write. He can't corroborate my story. And finally, in at number 1, Doraphobia. Doraphobia is unfortunately not the fear of Spanish or football-headed animated children. Instead, it's the fear of fur. But as I mentioned earlier in this list, the main antagonist of Chapter 1, Huggy Wuggy, is covered in fur, and is absolutely massive. Not to mention the group of Huggies that we're going to be chased by in Chapter 2, multiplying our fur problem by 5. So needless to say, if you have a fear of fur, then you may want to avoid Poppy Playtime. Unless, again, it's just the fear of real life physical fur instead of animated video game fur, in which case it won't really be triggered. But like, how am I supposed to know this, right? How am I supposed to see something like this Huggy doll and think, oh yeah, he won't trigger it, or he will trigger it? Like, I don't have these phobias for the most part, alright? Like, I don't understand. This whole list should be taken with a grain of salt. However, if you legitimately have any of these fears that I've listed today, be sure you let me know in the comments. if it actually triggers it, because I really want to know. And we've been making a load of these types of videos lately, so it would really be beneficial to know what will and won't be set off by a computer game. I mean, it's not like I'm gonna change. I'm still gonna talk about the fears even if they won't be set off, but like, it's good to know. And at 10, Huggy's return. Now after the trailer for Chapter 2 came out, I think it's fairly safe to say that Huggy Wuggy, or at least the one we fought in Chapter 1, Experiment 1006, is indeed dead. The symbolism in the first shot of the trailer says it all, unless that's meant to mean that Mommy is going to bring him back somehow. However, it's also worth noting that one of the Huggies that comes after us in a clip later on in that trailer is blue. So, could this be the same Huggy? I don't really think that it is, but it's technically possible. Like, if this was indeed supposed to be a team of like assault Huggies, I don't think 1006 would be there, because like, and if he was, we'd be fighting off 6 Huggies instead of 4. So seemingly the only 2 that are missing from this fight are Kissy Missy and 1006. And considering how Kissy is missing, I think it's because she's over mourning Huggy and trying to bring him back or something, maybe, like, I don't know. But like, at least for this chapter, Huggy is hopefully dead. And maybe the assault of the Huggies is actually because of his death and the rest are mad at us. But this could all just be a ruse and we'll have to contend with Huggy again later on. We didn't see a corpse at the end of Chapter 1, so as we learned from FNAF, anything is possible in indie horror. In at 9, Poppy's side. There is a narrator in this trailer as well. Someone who's giving us the rundown and telling us that Mommy doesn't like visitors. Like, damn, Mommy, okay, I get it. You like your private time. You don't want a crowd. I get it, I respect it. However, this voice is most likely Poppy, unless it's a character that we haven't been introduced to yet. And if this is Poppy, it is kind of confirming the theories that people had about Chapter 1, where we thought that Poppy was going to be a passive and helpful character, unlike Huggy. Both due to her willingness to be a toy when she was human and her gratefulness at being released from her case. Although, there is still a possibility for kind of like a double cross, Circus Baby style, okay? Because now she's like trying to like guide us, and like she has a secret agenda. I'm absolutely positive of it. As to whether that secret agenda is going to be good for the player or not, we don't know. So unless this is a new character that wasn't introduced yet, this is definitely Poppy, since Mommy Longlegs' voice isn't used until the end of the trailer when she taunts the player. Or I guess technically taunts the audience, because we're not playing. And at 8, who is Huggy? Now, I think it's been fairly well established that the various monsters we're going to be facing throughout these chapters are humans turned into toys, instead of humans turned into animatronics. But while we seem to know the identity of Poppy, Stella Graber, we're unsure of who Huggy's human was, or even if it matters. Some consider Leith Pierre to be Huggy's human, and it's certainly possible, but as of yet unconfirmed, thus it remains a mystery. It could really be anyone, aside from us as the player, seemingly aside from Stella, or from the researcher in the videotapes talking about how Experiment 1006 escaped. But at least we now know that Huggy is 1006, and not because of the other characters like Braun and Cappy, but instead he's 1006 because of the other iterations of Huggy that we seem to be interacting with in Chapter 2, Fly in a Web, which is already a creepy type because we all know how I feel about spiders. DJ Music Man is okay because he has 6 legs and not 8. And while Mommy Longlegs only has 4 legs, there are a load of spider webs all over this chapter, okay? So I'd rather not. Plus, I mean, like a spider who makes you call her mommy? No thank you. And at 7, hemophobia. Now, there may not be much blood in this game, but for those with hemophobia, the fear of blood, a little is more than enough. Especially with Huggy bashing his head on the way down and the various seemingly dried bloodstains along the ground and walls while you play through Chapter 1. This is certainly going to be a fun time. However, I think the worst part would be looking at the pipe that Huggy hits his head on the way down after we destroyed the catwalk when he was chasing us. Because let's be real here, that's pretty gnarly. Even if it is just a puddle, I mean, like, we thought this thing was a toy, then all of a sudden it's bleeding? Hemophobia is the fear of blood, wounds, and injuries. Hemophobia is categorized by the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as a blood injection injury phobia. This subtype, which also includes trypanophobia, which is the fear of needles, is kind of normal. Like, having an aversion to blood is natural. And in fact, horror movies and horror games often prey on our discomfort by showing large quantities of fake blood to inspire fear and unease in their audience. However, hemophobia causes much more than discomfort. It can cause symptoms that are also not frequently seen in other types of specific phobias as well. And at 6, dystophophobia. Dystophophia encompasses a fear of all forms of physical accidents, including those that occur in the home, the workplace, public spaces, and roadways. A person with this phobia fears accidents above all, which includes the consequences of said accidents, such as harm to themselves and or others. And the whole Poppy Playtime funhouse factory thing seems to be about as safe as Willy Wonka's chocolate chocolate factory. This phobia is often seen in a person who has been in a serious or near fatal accident in the past, and in some cases the phobia can be triggered by an accident involving someone else, such as a friend or a family member. And I mean, how is this factory not just one seemingly giant accident waiting to happen? Open conveyor belts, power puzzles waiting for anyone without a grab pack just to get shocked, probably to death. I don't know, giant children's toys running around eating every single possible thing it can, especially living things. Yeah, seems pretty accident prone to me. Like damn, I don't even fear accidents and I can sense how slippery this floor is. And then, to escape Huggy, we run along conveyor belts, for God's sake. Like that would be horrific. Halfway through into number 5, scopophobia. Scopophobia, also known as scopophobia, is the fear of being stared at or watched. It varies in severity from person to person, obviously, but some people are afraid only when a stranger stares at them for a long period of time, while others fear even passing eye contact with a friend. But it's the fear of being watched thing that I want to focus on, since thanks to Terrico, we know that there are multiple instances of Huggy scaring us before we actually get killed by him, as well as other instances of him being in a separate area while watching us, like when we first enter the conveyor belt system, because, you know, he runs in front of us. However, one of the freakiest things that hardly anyone seemed to notice was when you enter the room where you find the 4 colored cubes. This room doesn't really have all that much to it aside from a simple search and grab task, and then you get the second grab pack hand, but as you enter the room after gathering all the batteries, with the exception of the blue one and then going back up the stairs, you can actually see Huggy watching you from one of the conveyor belt doors before it slams closed after a second or two. It's something that nobody seemed to pick up on in their first playthrough, and something that I don't even think MatPat noticed. But if you do notice, and you have scopophobia, I'm sorry. And at 4, megalophobia. Megalophobia is a type of anxiety disorder in which a person experiences intense fear of large objects. A person with megalophobia experiences intense fear and anxiety when they think of or are around large objects such as large buildings, statues, animals, and vehicles. And I mean, the main antagonist of not only Chapter 1 but Chapter 2 are also pretty damn big characters. I mean, Huggy is already like 100 times the size of the normal Huggy dolls, and Mommy Longlegs has arms that seemingly go on for miles, in a literal sense, not like in a complimentary sense, like damn, those legs go on for miles. No, like those things are seemingly at least a mile long each, or 1.6 kilometers for the rest of the world, which makes sense. I mean, her name is Mommy Longlegs, but come on, those are damn big. And combine this with any of the other fears on this list and you'd probably just be unable to play this game at all. It wouldn't seem possible in my eyes. And at 3, the process. What is the process for turning humans into toys? Like, is it scientific? Is it ritualistic? Is it demonic? What is the process to make toys out of humans? Like, in such a way that they would actually bleed and need to eat and like have organs and stuff. Because if it was demonic, I feel like it would be more of like in the realm of just like transporting the soul of the person into the stuffed toy. But this time around, I have absolutely no idea how they actually do this kind of thing. And I don't think that the toy machine we see in Chapter 1 actually has anything to do with it. It feels to me like more of a MacGuffin, like something to distract us. That machine doesn't really have any significance aside from just making the Cappy toy that lets us move on. Out of just toy parts, might I add. No humans involved in that toy making process aside from us getting the items moving. Like, I doubt that we will ever actually get an answer because, like, how do you explain something like that? But hey, it's still something interesting to think about. But ultimately, into number 2, the player. The idea that we ourselves are a toy is so seemingly off the rails that it fits perfectly within this story, or the story that we think could be playing out. If people are being turned into monstrous versions of these toys, and Huggy Wuggy was supposedly Experiment 1006, what if we're also an experiment? Starting off the game, we don't see any of our own body, not even our hands, being only able to grab stuff with the grab pack given to us at the start of the game. So, yeah, why would we not be able to use our own hands if we're human? Like, that would just be instinctive, right? Like, if there's a toy in front of me, I'm not gonna like push a button to grab it. I'm gonna just reach my hand out. Well, it would make sense if we are a toy, but the game didn't want us to know that yet. It could also explain how we're brought back to life over and over, and that one death line of death isn't permanent, since being a toy combined with a human would most likely not end up dying permanently. Maybe. Especially if there is some other entity that's able to resurrect us like Poppy. I don't know, but like being a toy kinda sounds like this could be where the story is going. But and finally, into number 1, the story. The biggest mystery of this game. seems to be the actual story. Like, we don't know what any character in this series has planned. We don't know Poppy's true intentions. We don't know why we came back to the goddamn Playtime factory, aside from a cruelly written letter that, let's be honest, nobody would have really believed. Things just don't quite add up, and that's the whole point of an indie horror game. Things aren't supposed to add up. That would make it way too easy. And while some people online do have ideas about what's really going on in Poppy Playtime, those are just theories. They have evidence, but they aren't confirmed. And with so many different interpretations about what could actually be the story, we really have to take them with a grain of salt until we know more. Some seem more likely than others, but I mean, who really gets what they expect in an indie horror game? The people making it, exactly. The creators and Steam gets what they want. And with the creators of Poppy Playtime making missteps like hiding clues in merch and even NFTs, yeah, you thought I was done with that? No. We can't be sure that we know where their story is heading. And yes, I'm not kidding, they actually made NFTs that caused such backlash that they had to apologize and actually promise not to do it again. So yeah, we really don't know what they're thinking. Clearly. And it's 7 chapters. While we know that chapter 2 is set to release sometime this spring, seemingly, hopefully, we don't know overall how many chapters they really plan on having. And if they have mentioned it or have said it somewhere in the past, forgive me, but even if they did, I don't know if we can really trust them. I mean, we were originally only supposed to get 3 FNAF games, and here we are on number 9. So I don't think that we can really trust them. Any successful franchise will keep going as long as they can, especially when the company cares about sales. And considering some of the things that the community had to do to get the name of Mommy Longlegs before the trailer came out, because we didn't even get it in the trailer, I think we can all agree that they do indeed enjoy money, but I mean, we all do. And before you ask, yes, I'm talking about those goddamn NFTs. Like, what were you thinking, Enchanted Mob? Like, very few gamers from what I've seen like the concept of NFTs, since it's basically EA microtransactions on illicit substances. So, I really don't know why you thought it would be a good idea to release 30,000 of them, only to sell 600, but I guess you get what you deserve. Halfway through into number 5, human toys. The idea that humans are turned into toys is a pretty solid one, and it makes a load of sense. However, my original idea was that only some of the toys were made into humans. For example, only Poppy used in the commercials was a human, while the rest were actual toys. But now I'm thinking that it might be every single toy in this factory. Whether they be oversized, commercial props, or just normal toys, they could all be human, and that's pretty damn insane. Like, Fazbear Entertainment is doing some pretty questionable stuff, sending out animatronics to families when they know damn well that they're on the fritz, pun intended. But sending out toys to kids that are actually humans changed into toys is a whole other thing. Like, who the living tombstone thought that was a good idea? Or even like an alright idea. Like, sure, making a human into a doll for a commercial, I'd kind of understand. Like, there's a whole industry of food designers that make every food item in commercials look their best, like using mashed potatoes instead of ice cream. But this seems like it's just a little bit much, and I went to school for advertising, so I think I have at least enough knowledge to say that, because like, goddamn, that's weird. Getting close to the end, and number 3, put you back together. Have you ever accidentally brought your dead daughter back from death and put her in a doll, but then absolutely forgot how you did it? Well, apparently you're not alone, because now the theory is that instead of Stella Graber being the human turned into Poppy, that it's instead the dead daughter of Elliot Ludwig, the creator of Playtime Co., who, as we learned from these tapes in chapter 1, was pushed to his lowest of lows by the death of a family member. And while it's not confirmed who died, given that Enchanted Mob has made a lot of FNAF content in the past, Mob Games probably used it as partial inspiration for Poppy Playtime, resulting in at least some slight comparisons, like the death of a child, which in my mind at least counts currently as evidence towards it being the intended story, but like at least the intended story that it is now. I mean, like, who knows what they plan on doing in the future? Like, Scott changed the story halfway through, right? So they could do it as well. It's an indie horror game. Of course, it's gonna have some dead kids possessing things. I feel like that's kind of inevitable. But ultimately, in at number 2, Kissy hated Huggy. Kissy Missy makes a minor appearance in chapter 2 in the cart corridors. She is first seen walking towards the player in a similar style to how Huggy Wuggy was walking towards the vent chase scene, but she looks at the player for a short moment and then notices the lever next to her. She proceeds to then try to pull it downwards. She does it unsuccessfully on her first try, but then she manages to get it there a second try. That's why you always get back on the horse. And then once she pulls it, the metal gate starts to open. As the gate slowly rises up, she looks at the player once more and then walks away. Once the player reaches the end of the corridor from which she had actually come from, Kissy is now nowhere to be seen. But why would she help the player? It seems kind of redundant that we're literally trapped and ripe for the taking, so just like kill us and move on, right? Well, some think that Kissy Missy actually hated Huggy Wuggy and was glad that you took care of him. Her digital collectible profile also says, quote, Kissy Missy is more than just Huggy Wuggy's better half. She's a beacon of Playtime co-policies and won't hold back from letting the people know about it. So maybe she was just doing her job and preventing a workplace accident from happening since we were in fact trapped. The only question is, how did she know that we were there? And finally, in at number 1, we are the prototype. Now, I know I've suggested this before, but what if we are still the prototype? Experiment 1006. It seems a bit wild, but what have we seen of the prototype? So far, their hand. A single hand. Hell, even the monitor showcasing this creature ended up just showing a hand. But why? Is this creature just a hand? I mean, it seems a bit extreme, but it is possible. Since after all, what's the one thing that we don't see our characters supposedly having? Hands. We have to use a grab pack to actually interact with things that don't just push open. So could we really not have any hands and are just trying to find our missing piece? Mommy Longlegs knew that we used to work at the Playtime Co facility, and the prototype is listed as being capable of cooperation, but they're also listed as being extremely intelligent. And what have we been doing throughout these games? We are solving puzzles that get more and more complicated and showing our intelligence. There are quite a few parallels between us and the prototype, but it's only a question of when that might be revealed. And at 10, the cult. Whenever there is a case of a missing group of people in any game, not even just horror games, the classic question of were they in a cult will be asked. And honestly, it seems like it could be possible in Poppy Playtime, just more unlikely than some other options. Even if those options are stranger, which is weird. But I do see a possibility where these workers ended up forming some sort of cult surrounding the perfect toy of Poppy before trying to recreate her success in other toys only to fail miserably. They would end up worshipping Poppy like a god if this was the case. And what do we see? We see a room built specifically for her in a glass case, with a huge Poppy painting around the front door. While yes, this would end up later having graffiti that said not to enter this room, this doesn't seem like the actions of a group that fears Poppy. Why not encase her in steel to make sure that she couldn't escape? Or why paint a giant Poppy around the door when you could just pull a Henry Emily and seal the room off? It doesn't make sense, unless, at least for a time, they worshipped her like a goddess. And at 9, death messages. The messages we get when Huggy Wuggy kills us are certainly interesting. They set the theorist's senses off instantly since there is certainly more going on here. With lines like "don't die just yet," "more lives are at risk than just yours," "it's too early to die," and "I need you alive," there are bound to be many questions just based on us dying. Like, who's talking to us? Are they resurrecting us or are we actually dead? And what the hell is actually going on here? These are all good questions, and most people assume that Poppy is the one who's talking to us during these death screens, but I'm not so sure if this is the case. It could simply be another character we have yet to be introduced to. With only one chapter out of seemingly 6 currently playable, we don't really know everyone we need to. It could easily be something like the owner of the company who's hiding deep in the bowels of the building who's using a loudspeaker, or someone or something with supernatural abilities who's constantly resurrecting us. And at 8, next, villains. With Huggy Wuggy seemingly meeting his end in chapter 1, we have more chapters that will be needing villains. However, who will these villains be? It's possible that these villains will be the other toys that we've seen around the facility in chapter 1. The Pink Huggy, Brawn the Dinosaur, Boogiebot, Catbee, and Candy Cat are all possibilities for the next chapters, as well as Poppy herself, who will probably be the final villain if she is one at all. More on that later. But who will be the villain of chapter 2? MatPat seems to think that it's going to be Cappy, who was the only other toy featured on more than a poster in this chapter, with the exception of Poppy herself, since we have to make a Catbee toy to move on with the game, and then that toy seemingly disappears. However, I have no idea how they plan on making Catbee scary. Like, what? It's half bee, half cat. How is that supposed to terrify me? Unless, like, I have allergies to both. Like, Huggy already looks scary enough. Just the fact that he's like a monster, and then you can just add teeth to it. But a cat and a Catbee? It doesn't really seem that freaky to me. Although I will be interested to see how they do it. And at 7, Kissy is a good guy. Kissy Missy is a pink version of Huggy introduced in chapter 1 as a poster, but made a real appearance in chapter 2 as the worst lever puller ever. She was originally meant to be a girlfriend to Huggy Wuggy, so in essence she's just Huggy but the typical girlish color of pink. However, many fans are confused as to the reasoning behind Kissy helping us to continue, and some have drawn the conclusion that unlike Poppy, Kissy is actually going to be helpful. And I just want to say, don't get your hopes up. You think think that girl is going to be helpful, and at first she is, but after a few years, for some reason, she starts getting cold and doesn't seem to want to be around you. But whenever you bring it up, she ends up making it about her and how you're hurting her by asking about what's hurting you. And before you know it, you're walking along the train tracks wondering if you should get off, and sorry, that got a little intense for a second. Either way, I'm not too sure that Kissy is helping us, but rather she probably did it because otherwise we would have just left the factory instead of going deeper. So, yeah. In at 6, Jamie B. Honey. Coming from the wonderful mind of MatPat, Jamie B. Honey is the name that Matt is guessing belongs to our player character, thanks to a load of letters scattered along the grounds in the area that has the slides in Chapter 2. Based on the letters there, MatPat believes that Jamie B. Honey makes sense with the other names and is a reasonable conclusion. And honestly, I wouldn't doubt it. Hearing the name of Jamie B. Honey just sounds like it would be in the game, or even in Bendy and the Ink Machine. Like, that's such an indie game character name. I don't know how else to describe it. What do you think? With those letters, are there any other names that could sound like Elliot Ludwig or the like? Be sure you let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see your ideas. Halfway through in at number 5, Prototype is Afton. Aha, it's definitely a leap, but I gotta get those FNAF keywords and tags in here somehow, because this Prototype hand was certainly giving me another mysterious hand kind of vibes. Yes, I think that the idea for this Prototype hand came from the iconic Security Breach PlayStation trailer scene when Burntrap's hand reaches out from the recharge station and claws at the floor. The animations are similar, the vibe is similar, the only difference is that I didn't break Poppy Playtime multiple times while I was playing it. But is it possible that Experiment 1006, aka the Prototype, is actually William Afton? We actually made a whole video discussing how Afton could fit into the Poppy Playtime world, but we never considered if he was the Prototype. If he was though, it would simply be another universe that the FNAF story takes place in. But, like the butterfly effect, one change resulted in a totally different outcome. I doubt that's what they're planning on, but it's fun to think about nonetheless. In at 4, Huggy will return. Is it possible that Huggy Wuggy could make a return in a future chapter? Absolutely, it's an indie horror game, they can do whatever they want. But is it likely? Actually, it seems so. See, Huggy basically became the mascot for the series, despite the namesake Poppy being present in both chapters, because we've spent maybe around 5 minutes with the Demented Demon doll. So, in my mind, yes, Huggy could make a return, especially when we didn't see 1006 grab him like it did with Mommy Longlegs. Plus, additionally, in the water treatment facility in Chapter 2, you can see a wall with some blood and blue fur leading to a vent on the wall. This could have been where Huggy crawled to after bashing his head multiple times on the way down in Chapter 1, and this could even be where Huggy fell to. So, based on this one detail, Huggy Wuggy may make his vengeful return in a later chapter. But will we fall victim to him, or will we have some help from a certain pink monster? Penultimately, in at number 2, FNAF Multiverse. Okay, look now, I know this is going to make a lot of Poppy heads mad, but this is something that this channel is in essence obligated to talk about. Now, do I believe FNAF and Poppy Playtime share a universe or even a multiverse? No, not at all. But am I talking about this for the thumbnail? Abso-freaking-lutely. So, right off the bat, there are some similarities that we should point out between Poppy Playtime and FNAF. 1. They're both indie horror titles. They both also feature childhood figures turned killers, and that in some way all of these characters are human, be it by possession in FNAF's case, or by literally made of flesh to be your tormentor like in Poppy Playtime. However, are there any other similarities that we can use in-universe? Well, while there may be no references to FNAF in the games from what I could tell, this does seem to be the story of FNAF just on another Earth, where instead of making Circus Baby and the Funtime animatronics, William could have just made the Poppy doll instead. Notice how the two share a similar design. And while yes, Poppy was made in the 60s, maybe this is just what happened if William was born earlier than he was supposed to be. I mean, of course, this is all for fun, and is most certainly not the case, but it's fun to speculate anyway, right? Plus, thumbnail. In at 10, Boxy Boo. Probably the biggest reveal in this game, and the most interesting way I've seen a new character or antagonist be revealed is Boxy Boo, who's the newest antagonist monster with a desire to just tear you apart while looking like an innocent giant jack-in-the-box. What's with these games and having giant monsters that are focused on like kid memory objects, right? Like a giant jack-in-the-box that will tear you limb from limb while they chase you around a toy factory, and a giant Thomas the Tank Engine knockoff that's pumped itself full of too much Stephen King that it started terrorizing an entire island? Well, no matter what, this is probably going to be the antagonist of Chapter 3. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like the general consensus. And using the whole game to reveal that instead of just doing it in a trailer like they did with Mommy Longlegs was definitely a new approach. I mean, like, I get just doing it in a trailer, especially since this game is free, but it just seems odd until I remembered that since Mommy Longlegs hadn't been introduced previously, none of us really cared about the character when she was introduced in the trailer. So since Boxy Boo also wasn't established, maybe this game was them making the reveal for them in Chapter 3 or possibly 4 more exciting in a way. And at 9, Chapter 2. The trailer for the game that I didn't think came out before the game itself and just kind of popped up on Steam, and it's just kind of on the Steam page, also kind of sets some rules right away. Firstly, it establishes that this is the same facility as the one from the games by giving us the same scene from Chapter 2's trailer. Well, okay, not like the same scene as in like the same shot from like top-down view of Huggy's toy, but the shot of Huggy on the ground in that pose, but this time around, instead it's Huggy on the ground in that pose where you can picture the camera being above him. But this time around, the green RE specialist picks it up, which is important, and I'll get to that in a minute. But then the toy reveals that it's also a monster, and Green stomps the life out of it, which is something I think we all wanted to do. We know that this was in fact alive thanks to the blood that is left under its head after, you know, it gets its skull stomped on. But this establishes a couple of things. One, that even the smaller toys sold by Playtime Co. are in fact humans, most likely the kids from the orphanage mentioned in Chapter 2. And 2, that the Huggy we see Mommy grab at the beginning of the second chapter trailer is, as we figured, a toy. And that because of that, MatPat is probably right thinking that she had to eat a lot of the toys in the building to keep herself going and keep herself sustained. So that's fun. I don't think MatPat likes me. I had this revelation this morning, and it ain't grab pack changes. There's also some changes to the grab packs in this game, since the hands, at least in this game, are related to the RE specialist suits that you're in. If you're red, your hands are red. If you're blue, you have blue hands, etc. At least without customization. But this pulls into question what we are doing in the first game having to get different colored hands, because any RE specialist can complete any puzzle, but the buttons that you have to place your hand on to activate the minigames are green. By the logic of the main story games, we wouldn't be able to interact with those, and we would need the green RE specialist to actually activate any minigames, making them the most essential part of the team and a first priority for any decent monster. For anyone who's playing to win as the monster and not just trying to have fun. Competitive online play would basically just become Protect Green, unless players could get green hands elsewhere, which is probably why they scrapped this rule for this game. But it's still an interesting discretion to point out when I need to fill out a top 10 list. You can also add cosmetics to your grab pack, like any free game trying to get your money, and I'm pretty sure that it has its own battle pass too, but you can have Mommy Longleg be the reason your arms can extend, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't want to talk about. And it's 7, grab pack. The grab pack is certainly an interesting item. Used as in essence giant sticky hands, the first half of the grab pack is granted to us at the very beginning of the game and is a key mechanic in the game, being the main way to solve most of the game's puzzles. However, one of the big questions is why do we need this grab pack? Other than electricity puzzles, grabbing tape, and blocking progression, why are we limited to using this? It's almost as if we don't have any actual hands to use, but that raises the question, how are we able to use the grab pack if that was the case? Since we would normally just assume that we're just pulling triggers on some handles or something. But even before getting the grab pack, we don't see any of our body, not even our normal hands. And why is that? Well, maybe there's more of an explanation coming later on. And at 6, Poppy's a good guy. The first chapter of Poppy Playtime ends with us opening Poppy's display case with the lights flickering and her saying, "You opened my case," in what also seems to be an almost thankful tone. This is also something that MatPat mentioned in his game theory episode on the subject. This also relates to who Matt believes is behind Poppy, or I guess who Poppy really is, and that's Stella, a woman who is obsessed with trying to live forever and bringing joy to children like her toys did for her. And what better way to do that than being turned into a living toy? Well, there are actually plenty of ways that you could do that don't involve having to convert your living flesh into a doll that talks to kids, but hey, it's an indie game. Plus, if Stella wanted to be a toy, she wouldn't be mad about being turned into one, she'd be delighted. And now, thanks to you opening her door, she can go and bring that joy to children. Or will she? Halfway through into number 5, Global Massacre. The idea that there is something bigger at stake here is another idea that's been floating around the internet. Thanks to the death line of "there are more lives at stake than just yours, wake up," which could also allude to Dream Theory, but I'm not touching that one with a top 10-foot pole. Get it? The global massacre idea started because, well, what else is going on to cause more lives to be at stake here other than toys actively trying to kill you? Plus, this only happens if you die and don't get rid of Huggy Wuggy at the end of the chapter. Since he bashes his head multiple times, I'm going to guess that they're definitely dead at this point. Plus, this thing is like 11 feet tall and definitely wants to go on a mass killing spree, with one section of the trailer suggesting that it just kills for fun and doesn't require sustenance. So what's the overall goal here? Well, we still don't know. With only one chapter out, we can't really gather all that much evidence, but alas, we're guessing anyway. Mostly because I wanted a break from FNAF, and this seems like something you'd all be into. And at 4, Poppy's hair. Poppy's hair is meant to smell like poppies because that's her name. However, poppies themselves don't really have much of a smell unless you're talking about the ones made for a certain kind of substance. Or the ones used to make a certain kind of substance, I should say. Those poppies are used for various illicit substances, however, they are also good at putting people to sleep. It was even used as a form of treatment when medicine wasn't really as advanced as it is today. So, could this have been the point behind Poppy's hair? Could this doll have actively been selling to parents instead of their kids? If this doll was shown to be able to keep kids calm or put them to sleep, I'm sure a load of parents, especially in the 1960s when Poppy was invented, would have been down for it, especially if the kids were like me. I literally at one point tried to run into traffic. I knew what adulthood would be like. And we know that the company behind Poppy and the others are certainly not the pinnacle of corporate decency. Definitely not setting the gold standard for how to treat their employees, so is it possible that they could have done this and not really cared about the consequences? It's an indie game. Absolutely. Getting close to the end at number 3, Among Us. Now is it just me or are the characters in this trailer looking hella sus, okay? Like I was half expecting this game to be based on Among Us or like Secret Neighbor instead of Dead by Daylight because of the design of the players in the trailer. Of course, it could be a reference to the game, just like the golden statue could be a reference to FNAF, but you cannot look at me and say that they do not look like Among Us crewmates. I was half expecting one of them to jump into a vent to try to escape Mommy Longlegs, and none of them make it out of the facility from what we can see in the trailer. So are they just like sending wave after wave of RE specialists in there just to have them all die? Or is this like you only get one shot situation? Because the answer is going to greatly alter the story of this game or the course of the story for the series depending, okay? If it's intended to have one, at least. It could also just be an easy way to release the game and stay relevant until Chapter 3 comes out, but I don't know. This could just be the Chapter 3 that we didn't expect, and it's all freaking Among Us, because we know we all love that game, and Red is never sus, and I am not salty about any of the games I've ever had, especially ones on this channel. Also, by the way, fun fact, this game is technically released under a different company. Like, this one is by Mob Games, with games in all caps, while Poppy Playtime and Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is by Mob Games, with games only having a capital G. I don't know, some wouldn't think that it matters, but to Steam, it's a whole other company with its own page. If you didn't know, now you do. And finally, in at number 1, the Bigger Bodies Initiative. I wish this was a joke, but like any seemingly innocent spin-off game, there is, of course, a secret story with this one. You could say that it does in fact have hidden intent or purpose. Like with most Steam descriptions, typical categories within them, you know, like what is it, how to play, features. But the thing is, these sections aren't actually named to be sections. They're like blue subheadings, but the actual subheadings for the sections are actually messages to us. Can you hear us? Can you see this? Give us a sign. Those are the first 3, and by the end, we get a little bit more info with an entire block of text saying, quote, "The Bigger Bodies Initiative will fail. We will prevail. Stay alert. We will be in touch." Which is a total shift from the rest of the description, and I think I know exactly what this is. The final line of the actual game description is, "Won't you play fair?" but it starts glitching out, indicating that whoever this is has broken through and is sending us a proper message. The Bigger Bodies Initiative is a very interesting name as well, and given that the RE specialists are trying to build a bigger toy, you'd think that this is what they meant, but instead, I think that these are big monsters. Huggy, Kissy, Mommy, Boxy, I don't think they were intentional. That that wasn't something that Playtime Co. planned for, or that they were intentional, but whoever sent these specialists in is fighting against the monsters and believes that they will die off. Or maybe all of this is actually the prototype communicating with us, but we don't know because part 3 hasn't come out yet. But if you want to know as soon as it does, be sure you subscribe.